এই বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের প্রথম সমাবর্তন অনুষ্ঠানের বক্তা অধ্যাপক ডক্টর অ্যান্থনি কোস্টেলো। ডক্টর অ্যান্থনি কোস্টেলোর সংক্ষিপ্ত বায়োগ্রাফি আপনাদের সামনে উপস্থিত করা হচ্ছে। Convocation speech is one of the attractions of a ceremony like the first convention of the BUHS. The speaker for the first convention of BUHS is Professor Dr. Anthony Costello. Now, a brief biography of the convocation speaker will be presented to you.
A brief biography of Professor Anthony Costello. Anthony Costello is a professor of global health and sustainable development at University College London. His area of scientific expertise include the evolution of intervention to reduce maternal and newborn death, strategies to tackle malnutrition and non-communicable disease, and the health effect of climate change. He has extended experience in running population trial in Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Malawi, including large community trial of participatory learning and action using women's group. As Director of Maternal, Child and Adolescent Health at World Health Organization Geneva from 2015 to 2018. He led the global strategy for women's, children and adolescent health from 2016 to 2013. With the WHO team, he also launched the Global Accelerator Action for the Health of Adolescents and established an expert review group, maternal and newborn information for tracking outcome and result, a brief of monitor. To harmonize maternal and newborn health indicators in February 2017. Together with UNICEF and United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, he helped to launch the Network for Improving Quality of Care for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health to introduce evidence-based intervention to improve the quality of care for maternal and newborn health supported by a learning system. Shared the launch, cut down on climate action and health in February 2020. Was the corresponding author on the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission, A Future for Our Children. He held fellowship from the Academy of Medical Sciences and the Royal College of Physicians. He has also received honorary fellowship from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the Faculty of Public Health. In April 2011, Professor Costello received the James Payne Medal, the highest honor of the Royal College of Pediatric and Child Health, where he is a fellow. In May 2016, he received the BMG Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2018, he published a book, The Social Age, The Power of Sympathy Group for Our Health, Wealth and Sustainable Future. Thank you.
Thank you, Prema.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, Honourable Vice Chancellor, all the distinguished guests on the days, all the distinguished academics here, and especially to the graduates who have worked so hard over the last few years to achieve their degrees to be awarded today. Thank you for all your effort. This is a great day of celebration. Thank you also to the air conditioners for keeping us all cool over the next hour or two. I want to talk to you today about two things, the two most important threats to global health in the 21st century. Firstly, non-communicable diseases. Secondly, climate change and how they link together. And I will cover these three themes. So I came to Bangladesh for the first time in 1988. And I think it's worth remembering how things have changed since that time. You can see here, you have added the equivalent of the United Kingdom to your population. you have seen population growth fall, big movements from rural to urban areas. Your mortality rate of children has been slashed. Life expectancy has gone up 16 years. The fertility rate has now gone down from nearly 5 per woman to under the replacement rate of 2.1. So after your population peaks, it will fall again quite rapidly. Maternal mortality has been massively reduced, and nutrition has been greatly improved, although there's still a long way to go. So you've achieved fantastic things. This was what I found when I came in 1988, and this is what I found in 2024. And in a sense, this is the problem, because 2024 is about wealth and consumption, but it's also about pollution and carbon pollution and climate change. And so we face a whole suite of new problems. And if you look at the death rates from non-communicable diseases in 2020s, they fill all the top spots of stroke, heart attacks, neonatal conditions, chronic obstructive airways disease, diabetes, hypertension, and increasingly problems of Alzheimer's and other dementias. And so infectious diseases have not gone away, but we face a whole suite of new problems for the Bangladesh health system. And we know that the population has changed. When I first came here, there were many, many children and very few older people. Now that is shifting, and the numbers of children is declining and older people are increasing. And if you look at the trends in type 2 diabetes, you can see that at the moment there will be over 15 million people with diabetes in this country, and in another 20 years it will go up to about 22 million. And that does not include about 30 million people with pre-diabetes. And of course, women having a baby, they have the risk of almost 1 in 5 developing gestational diabetes. So this is a massive public health problem. And we know about the risk factors. We know about unhealthy diets, physical inactivity, being overweight or obese. And the WHO in blue say we must eat healthily, be physically active, avoid weight gain, which I find very difficult, check your blood glucose, follow medical advice, etc., and advice to governments. But I think they're missing something very important for Bangladesh. And that is that I'm a pediatrician by training. Everything begins in childhood, everything. And James Heckman was an economist who won the Nobel Prize for showing the world that everything you do to improve maternal and child health is good for your economy. The earlier you start, the better. Huge return on investment. And we must always remember that, and we must always emphasize that to politicians. And it affects adult disease, because we've now discovered that the roots of diabetes in Bangladesh begin with maternal malnutrition and fetal malnutrition. And this leads to impaired beta cell function and insulin resistance. But of course, smaller babies mean that with smaller mothers, they're more likely to survive. And it's very interesting that infant growth is actually controlled between the fight of maternal growth suppression genes and paternal growth enhancement genes. Mothers need their babies to be small so they don't die of obstructive labor. Fathers don't care, of course. Fathers just want bigger babies. So there is this evolutionary battle, and it's very interesting, but type 2 diabetes is the risk. My grandfather had type 2 diabetes. My father had type 2. I don't have it yet, and maybe that's because we are in the demographic transition. It will take 2 or 3 generations for this to be abolished. And if you look at, again, this diagram, the green is intervening early for maternal and infant nutrition. If you wait until adolescence, you can still have a big impact. But if you wait into adulthood, you're not going to have a big impact on the epidemiology. So it all starts with childhood. Now, breastfeeding is a very important issue. And in Bangladesh, the work of people like Ruxana Haidar and Professor Talukdar and many others have really supported exclusive breastfeeding, which is very important. Kingdom. And actually, if you look at rates around the world, this is an old slide, and Bangladesh was at 64%, but I've noticed that it's fallen to just above 50% over the past few years. But UNICEF and the Lancet emphasized that you could save huge numbers of deaths if you focus more on this and improve cognition and reduce obesity and type 2 diabetes. And then there's the problem of junk food and the changing patterns of childhood obesity and the use of sugary drinks that contribute to this. And the fact that all of these brands of food that we now buy in the shops and supermarkets are controlled by about 10 major food companies. So the commercial aspects of malnutrition have to be addressed by politicians. And we know about the commercial malnutrition that arises from inappropriate promotion of breast milk substitutes. And Bangladesh and India have done much to regulate that problem. We also know that childhood obesity is increasing everywhere, in my country, in Europe, in America, and it leads to a lot of the problems that we see much later in life. And the key steps are not difficult. It's preconception care, it's breastfeeding support, it is getting children early on to appreciate eating vegetables and fruit rather than just noodles. It's about exercise and opportunities for exercise in childhood, and it's about monitoring growth throughout people's childhood. And what's interesting is that I worked at WHO as director for a few years, and we put forward a child obesity program. And at WHO, you have to have the endorsement of every country, okay? And without that, it cannot be passed. So we did put this forward, and during the discussion, a few countries raised their hands and said, we don't like this wording. So the chairman said, go into another room and discuss it all. So we went into another room for 6 hours and discussed all the wording of a child obesity strategy. And at the end, 2 countries refused to approve it. So it was only welcomed, it was not actually endorsed. I will name those 2 countries. United States of America, that usually oppose these kind of proposals. And the other, interestingly, was Italy. And the previous year, we had done the same with a proposal to regulate inappropriate promotion of breast milk substitutes. And the same thing had happened. So after this, I had to go back. I was the director of MCA, and I had to present this finding to the whole meeting. And I saw that Tedros had left the building. So I took my opportunity to get a picture for my children of me as Director General of WHO. And I gave a short talk, which perhaps was not very diplomatic. And at the end, an American came up to me and said, Dr. Costello, I think I found your summary rather patronizing. And I said, well, actually, it's pronounced patronizing. But anyway, that was a... And of course, the New York Times covered the opposition to the breastfeeding resolution, and it said it stunned World Health officials. So this is the politics of nutrition. And we should not be naive that health is about politics, and we have to be involved in those discussions. So how can we change people's lifestyles and behavior? Is it through education, or mobile messaging, or taxes, or women's groups? And at this stage, I should mention 2 people who've been very, very important in my life, Azhar Khan and Kishwar Azad, who's now joined us. And Kishwar is the daughter of Ibrahim, who set up Birdem and the medical school. And she's a very idiosyncratic person. She's very funny, she's very dynamic, and she's extremely intelligent. And she set up a wonderful group of researchers that we've worked with now for 20 years to do a lot of studies on community mobilization in the reduction of newborn mortality. And we set up a whole number of trials in India, in Nepal, 2 in Bangladesh, in Malawi, and in Mumbai to look at this, and have shown actually that mobilizing women with their own facilitators can lead to a 30% reduction in newborn mortality. And it is fascinating to work with women's groups and to look at peer group pressure. And 10 years ago, we had a marvelous meeting of people from Jharkhand, Orissa, from Mumbai, from across Bangladesh and Malawi. And this was a picture taken at that time. And Kishwar and Azad said, we should go to the Sundarbans. And I thought, this is fantastic. So we went down there. I'll tell you in a minute. First of all, about Kishwar, she's like, you know David Attenborough, who does all the wildlife programs? She's like the David Attenborough of Mirpur. And she likes cats, so she has a nice cat. In fact, she has another cat that looks very different. In fact, she has 13 cats. And then, you know, a lot of people like to have a bird in a cage. So I thought, oh, I'd like to see the bird in her cage. There are 120 birds in her cage. And then I'm a bit frightened of dogs. And she has 5 terrifying dogs. But apart from all of that, she is a joy to work with, and it's been one of the great pleasures of my life. And then what can I say about Azhar Khan? Founder and not founder, but developer of Birdem Hospital into a national institution. Expander of the world's biggest diabetic association. A researcher who attracts international acclaim. Founder of the Ibrahim Medical School, and now the founder of this amazing university, which has brought the best and the brightest of Bangladesh together and has provided training for the future of Bangladesh, sitting at the back here receiving their degrees. And, you know, they give a Nobel Prize for medicine, but it's never given to doctors, it's always given to basic scientists. But if they really gave a Nobel Prize for medicine, medical practice, Azhar Khan would be my nominee. And Azad is much more than a physician. He's a horticulturalist, and he takes great pleasure in teaching me about botany. But he also teaches me about history. This is Job Charnock, who founded Kolkata, and he tells me all about Bengali history. And then yesterday we were talking about artificial intelligence. And he said, do you know where the word algorithm comes from? And of course I didn't know. And he said it was from the Persian mathematician Musa al-Khwarizmi, algorithm. So he knows everything. And it's been a total joy to work with him because he is my hero and my mentor. And I look up to him as a guide to how you run success. And I should say, discipline is life is the motto of the Bangladesh Diabetic Association. And for all the graduates at the back, it's all about hard work and not accepting failure. He works morning, afternoon, and evening every day. Right. And the Sundarbans, he taught me about the wildlife and about the role of mangroves in protecting this country from cyclones. And this is Hannah Arendt, probably one of the greatest philosophers of the 21st century. And she said, power is not the property of an individual. It belongs to a group, and it remains in existence only as long as the group keeps together. Once the group disappears, power vanishes. And so we were involved in a lot of programs for neonatal mortality, but then we decided to look at diabetes. And Kishore and her wonderful team got together and we looked at villages which had standard care from the diabetic hospitals that they have set up. And then another group of 32 villages who got mobile phone messaging, and then 32 villages that had women's groups and men's groups. And when I won't go into the detail, but the villages where there were groups mobilizing people for exercise, for better diet, cut the risk of pre-diabetes and diabetes by over half. And this was based on 12,000 people having glucose tolerance tests before and after. So this is and now I've just heard some fascinating data from Azad about work done with faith leaders, which he will present another time. But what about climate change? In 2007, the editor of The Lancet rang me up and said, you've now got an Institute for Global Health. Will you do a commission for us on climate change? And I said, I know nothing of climate change. He said, I don't want you. You can coordinate. Bring together all your faculties. And so we published a commission after 2 years, and we said climate change is the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. And it got a lot of media coverage. But then it was a report which gathered dust. So 5 years later, we did another one, this time saying, everything you do for climate change is good for your health. Cleaner air, less pollution, renewable energy. And so at the end of that, I said, we must have a countdown. A countdown is where you commit to produce regular reports. You involve international agencies, policymakers, so that you start to monitor the progress we're making. And so every year for the last 7 years, we've had annual reports, which we release just before the COP, the COP meetings about climate change. And we now have 70 institutions, and I'd like to add the Bangladesh University of Health Sciences to this picture, and 300 scientists working in 5 groups on impact, adaptation, economics, co-benefits, and public engagement. And we now have regional groups around the world, and we're talking here this week about setting up a South Asia group to produce their own regional reports in The Lancet to show us what's happening. And I just want to show you very quickly just a few examples of the indicators. So we know over the last decade that heat waves have greatly increased. We all know about that this week. And they affect particularly people exposed to the heat, the rickshaw wallahs, the agriculturalists, and older people, and also young babies. And a recent study just published last week shows that extreme heat affects Indian women more than men, and they get a spike in deaths, which may be related to agricultural work. We know that drought is increasing across the world, whether it's severe, extreme, or exceptional. And the percentage of land has increased affected by drought dramatically, again, over the last 20 years. In Nepal, they've had a drought in winter in 8 out of the last 12 winters. We know that this leads to wildfires around the world, which have greatly increased as well. And we know that loss of earnings from agriculture is extremely important, especially in low-income countries, especially in Bangladesh, because up to 5% of your GDP can be affected by that. And we know about migration, displacement, and future sea level rise. We know about death tolls from flash floods in the Himalaya, about increasing landslides in the Himalaya, and we know about migration and displacement in Bangladesh, which is one of the most severely affected countries. We know that food security and undernutrition is now starting to increase again, related to heat waves and to drought, and that situation may get much worse. We know that most countries, not Bangladesh, do not have good impact plans about vulnerability and adaptation. This week there's a big meeting in Bangladesh, and I note that your Prime Minister gave a talk just 2 days ago in which he emphasized 6 points, which I completely agree with. We must all cut carbon emissions. High-income countries should match their promise of providing $100 billion to a climate fund. They haven't done that. We must transfer clean energy technology, loss and damage payments for all the people affected, rehabilitation of displaced people, and we must have a global partnership. And unfortunately, looking around the world today, the political scene is not encouraging for global partnerships. And one good thing is that mayors of municipalities around the world are taking very positive action. And mayors are closer to their population and they have control of budgets. And I was told this week about Clean and Green Rajshahi, that the mayor of Rajshahi has taken a lot of actions there to introduce cleanness and greenness, like in Bangalore. And I want to go and visit Rajshahi actually next time I come. But urban green spaces have declined. Urban green spaces are very important for all of us, to walk, to breathe, for children to play. And yet in low-income countries, you find that actually that has declined. And I look at Dhaka, and many of the parks have been built on, and it's difficult. So I do think that political planning in the future must focus on trying to provide those kind of green spaces and greening the motorways, the expressways, all of the houses. We can do much more to improve that. And we know about air pollution, that Dhaka is one of the most polluted cities in South Asia, that overall air pollution causes 7 million deaths, and a lot of that is attributable to fossil fuels and to coal burning. And this I found just a couple of days ago from a study in Dhaka showing all the different pollutants that you can measure. And I've visited the lab here where the environmental team can measure a lot of pollution. And we need to do that on a much more micro scale so that we give people information about the effects of these pollutants and how they're affecting their health now and in the future. And this is a big issue. Over the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, the oil companies in the world have made $1,500 billion in profit. And you would think they would be investing that in renewable energy so that they are renewable energy companies for the future. But no, they've invested it all in digging out more oil. And that is a huge problem, because if that is all used, we are going to go way over the commitments from the Paris Agreement. And yes, renewables are taking off. Renewable energy is cheaper than fossil fuel energy. We should remember that. And it is going exponential. But if you look at the blue figure, 2.3%, that is the amount of renewable energy contributing to electricity in low-income countries. I don't know the figure for Bangladesh, but there is ample scope for much greater investment in solar energy, hydro, etc., etc. And I was at the World Bank yesterday, and I hope now that the World Bank has now got a Sikh director who is not a climate skeptic like the previous one. And I think the World Bank should be investing far more, especially in countries like Bangladesh, on climate protection. And I have to say, climate scientists are very worried. I saw in the paper yesterday that they're saying this heat wave is all due to El Nino, which is a sort of part of the natural cycle. But actually, on the left here, you see a graph from a very eminent meteorologist saying even if you adjust for El Nino and volcanic eruptions and solar activity, there is an accelerating warming. And if you look on the right, the yellow curve was heating last year when we exceeded 1.5 degrees, which was the Paris limit. And this year, we're going up towards 2 degrees. So they are worried about tipping points, because once you go above a certain level, a lot of positive feedback happens. So what can we do about all of this? How am I doing? I must finish soon. What can we do about policy and practice? How many people here are over 35? most people in the front here are over 35, and I suspect that most of you have optimism bias. You think this is, okay, we're a bit warmer, but it's all going to be okay. How many people here at the back are under 35? People are shy to put their hands up, but I think most people who are students are. And most of them are very worried because they know about climate change. They've been taught about it in schools. But all of this is wasted emotion because there is so much that we can do. We should have been doing this 20 years ago. So basically, it's a role for government, for institutions like universities, businesses, and individuals. And this is not a cost. This is an investment. If we invest in clean energy and all the things we must do, we will get a huge benefit. If we don't, there will be massive costs. And we know about all of this. I'm not going to go through it, about renewable energy eliminating subsidies for fossil fuel, which are $7 trillion a year, according to the IMF. Better public transport. I like your metro, by the way. Carbon neutral buildings, reforesting, recycling, sustainable agriculture, plant-based diets. Your diet actually is very good as a plant-based diet. Green business and infrastructure. There's so much that we can do. I'm not going to go through this because you can read this, the things that WHO recommend governments to do. But I will say this, that the healthcare industry is responsible for 5% of all global greenhouse emissions. And what's interesting, if you look here, is that the direct emissions from facilities and their energy is only a small amount. 82% comes from the drugs we use, the procedures we do, and all the other things as part of our healthcare. Now, look down that list. How many people here are doctors, nurses, paramedics, health managers, all of that list there? I think there are very few people who do not fit into that category. And therefore I say you're all future leaders. You can all take measures to make sustainability a number one priority in what you do. And you can focus on solutions, things that will make a difference. This is a ChatGPT picture I asked for about sustainable healthcare. So make your health facilities green, use renewable energy, involve old people so that they come together in groups. And Azad emphasizes this, the digital revolution in healthcare means that in 10 years' time, almost all healthcare could be delivered at people's homes digitally, using local health workers to do all kinds of scans. It's only for acute. Yeah, I've almost finished, 2 minutes, thank you. So I think this is very important. We need to do work with our health workforce to emphasize sustainability. I work with a center in Oxford that does a lot of online courses, but I'm sure there will be many others being developed by this new university in the near future. And we need to have information systems, but it's very complicated, so I think you should focus on specific problems that you can address, such as, do you use single-use plastics? In America and Europe, too much, we're all eating plastic. Plastic's everywhere now. We should be stopping that. Not using high carbon inhalers, not using anesthetic gases. I talked to an anesthetist who said in Britain now she only uses injectable anesthetics. And most of our healthcare is low value. Are we wasting money on low value care? And can we do more about primary care? In Britain, we spend 92% of our budget on hospitals and 8% of primary care. That needs to shift because most of the NCD problems can be addressed in primary care with support from tertiary and secondary care, particularly on digital matters. And you are a world leader in this. And all the other problems of heat stress, food insecurity, community health workers, biodiversity, all of this takes place in the community. And, you know, the UK is a wealthy country, but we 1 in 4 of our children live in food insecure households. Air pollution triggers asthma across the country. Child mental health referrals are up 50% since the pandemic. So we have all these problems. We're all in this together. Finally, we need to provide better data for policymakers. Dr. Sen will know this. He's a minister, and he has to deal with so many things. Attention span is short. This is something we've worked with WHO and UNICEF to provide child health data across the board at a snapshot. We're doing well. And they need that kind of information so that they know how to focus. And this is now available. You can get this on the WHO website, UNICEF, or Children in All Policies, which is something we coordinate. And I'll leave you with this. This is a pilot project to involve children, not just to tell children to go on strike about the climate change, but also to get involved. So this was in Nepal. A colleague of mine ran this where children were given mobiles and apps, and they could go around and map their environment, map the number of pests and pollinators, map climate hazards, and that they love this work, and the teachers love this work, and this could be fed into communities to think about protecting their own climate change resilience. And last, I'll leave you with this. The only person I know in the world who holds this position is in Wales. The government of Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom, appointed this woman, Sophie Howe, to be what they call a Future Generations Commissioner. And her job was to look at every new policy, every new legislation, to see how it would affect future children. And she managed to block a number of initiatives because it would be damaging. And I think every country in the world needs a Future Generations Commissioner. On that, I'll leave you and just say, all of our job as future leaders is to communicate and mobilize. Mobilize people in the way that Azar Khan is brilliant. No single person can liberate a country. You can only liberate a country if you act as a collective, said Nelson Mandela. There's so much we can do on that. I'll thank you.
ধন্যবাদ মাননীয় সমাবর্তন বক্তা আপনার দিক নির্দেশমূলক বক্তব্যের জন্য। Thank you, Professor Dr. Anthony Costello, for your brilliant illuminating lecture.